In the last video, we got this barrel modeled, and in this video, we are going to texture the barrel. We're going to put some textures on it, and I can show you what those are going to look like here. We're going to put a texture like this on the side of the barrel, and we'll also map something on top of the barrel. So let's pop over to Blender here. Now to do this, what we're going to do is create a UV map. And a UV map is a way of telling Blender how to wrap a two-dimensional texture around a three-dimensional object. So to get to that part, there's a UV editing tab up here. So we click on UV editing, and this is our UV map on the left, and this is our object here on the right. And I'm just zooming in with the mouse wheel there. Now, by default, we have a UV map supplied with us, for us. Now, if you go through these icons on the left, up from the bottom by one, Object Data Properties, the UV map is hiding under there. You have to kind of drop it down. UV maps, there it is, it's hiding. And if actually, that's a pretty good UV map right there. Let's just go with this. So by default, you get a UV map. Usually it doesn't work out, but that worked out great. So what I did was I just hit A to select the entire object. And Blender has now created this UV map for me. So what I can do now, let's select all there. Oops. See, now, why did that not work? Well, let's look at the back of the shape. You can see that those surfaces didn't get selected. So if you click and drag like that, you're not going to get everything. If you want to get everything, you need to be in wireframe mode, or you have to click A to select everything. So, well, let's just work with this. This is pretty good. What I'm going to do here, and I'm going to do this a little bit differently from the crate. In the crate, we worked directly in this UV editor on the left. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. But we can export this out and then kind of work on it in Photoshop or GIMP. And that's what I'm going to do in this example. So let's go to UV here, and I'm going to say Export UV Layout. I'm going to export this UV layout, and I'll call it like Barrel Unwrap or something. And where am I going to put this? I'll put this in my barrel folder here. Barrel, there we go. So I'm going to call this thing like Barrel _unwrap.png. And I'm going to click Export UVW Layout. So I've now, there we go. So I've now exported this as a GIF or a PNG file. And then what I'm going to do is put my textures over what I see here, and then I'm going to use this to create a material. So now the next thing I'm going to do is fire up GIMP. Okay, so here's GIMP. Here's my paint program, or you could do this in Photoshop too. I'm going to close this. Now the first thing I'm going to do is go open that UVW wrap, or whatever I call it. So I'm going to go to File, Open, and what did I call that thing? Let's sort it by date. And barrelunwrap.png, is that it? Let's find it. Hang on. I just had to browse into the right folder. There's the thing that I just exported, barrel_unwrap.png. I'm going to open that up. And there's our UVW unwrap, or our UVW layout from Blender. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in those textures, and I'm going to put them in here. So let's go to, now we don't want to open these as new images. We want to open our textures as layers in this existing image. So we're not going to do open. We're going to do open as layers. We're going to select open as layers. And then let's grab one of our barrel textures. So how about barrel texture2.jpg? That looks like a good one. All right. So now what I'm going to do is transform this layer so that it fills up this square, or the top part right here. So I can move this layer here using the move tool. I can move this layer, and I can scale this layer as well. So to scale a layer, they keep the scale tool. There you go. So if you see a little arrow at the bottom left of these, you can kind of expand them. There's like multiple tools hiding in each one of these icons. So we want scale. So we're going to select scale, or Shift S would do that too. Now, if you want to scale uniformly, keep this little, you've got this little chain link you can click on. This means that, like, whatever you scale at in width, you're also going to scale at in height. You're locking width and height together. Let's just try that and see how that goes. It's probably not going to work. But I'm going to, that's not going to work. So I'm going to scale the thing up lengthwise, and then what I'm going to do is just bring it down vertically. So what I'm trying to do now is just make sure that the image, that texture, completely covers the area that's going to be mapped onto the barrel. So, and then I'll click scale. So now I've put a texture like that box of UV vertices is now going to have this texture applied to it. For the top of the barrel, that could be a little trickier. So what I'm going to do here, I notice over here in GIMP now I've got two layers. I've got my background layer, and I've got my texture on top of that, and I can turn those on and off with the eyeballs over here. Let's import another layer, open as layers, and I'm going to grab a different barrel texture here. How about, not that one, not that one. What I want is just a nice, actually even the crate would work, because what I want is a nice, like, kind of top of a barrel. Why can't I find what I'm looking for? Okay, so in my assets for this project, I have now put the top of the crate, because I think that'll work really well. Oh, that's the one I wanted, barrel texture right there. Oh, for the love of God. Okay, let's go back to GIMP, and we could have used either one of those. So let's do open as layers, and let's go find where we were. Let's go find those resources. For me, it's documents, teaching, Blender, barrel. Why don't I see it? Anyway, oh, that's the one I was going to pick. So let me pick. You could use the top of the crate. You could use the barrel texture. I'll just use the barrel texture.jpg here, and you'll see where I'm going with this in a second. And you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. So what I'm going to do here, and notice now this is not this is a separate layer. This barrel texture right here. Let me scale it up. So Shift S to scale, and remember I can scale uniformly using this little chain link right here. So let me scale it up uniformly, and I'll click on the middle here and position it down where it was. Now let me click. I think that's pretty good. Let me click scale. This may not be perfect. Now to see the base layer, or the bottom layer through this, I've got a transparency slider on the right. So I can make layers kind of opaque, not opaque, or I can change their opacity. So what I'm going to do is kind of move this thing. Looks like I might have to scale it up just a little bit more. All right. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm going to cut out a circle of this layer and use that as the top of the barrel. So, oh, come on. Come on, slider. There we go. There we go. Let me scale up this layer a little bit more. Shift S to scale. There we go. And scale. Okay. Now let me change the opacity on that so it's kind of see-through. There we go. So now I can see the barrel through the top of the, or I can see the UV map through the texture. And then what I'm going to do is come up here to ellipse select, and we'll see how this goes. We'll see how this goes. May not go perfectly. And what I'm going to do now is click and drag out an ellipse. Now, if I hold down the Shift key while I do this, it's going to stay as a circle. So I want to get something that's pretty close to that. to that circle right there. And it's actually, it'd be better if it's just a little bit bigger. It may not be perfect. I'd say that's pretty good right there. So now what I'm going to do, let's turn the opacity back up. I'm going to cut out the top of the barrel here. I'm going to say edit, cut. Okay, so now, and then what I'm going to do is say edit, paste as new layer. How about paste as new layer? Yeah, paste as new layer. How about that? Okay, so now what I've done is I've just chopped out the center of that, and I'm going to use that as the top of the barrel. And now I can delete that other one that I had. Now, to get the bottom of the barrel, I can just take that same layer and I can duplicate it. I'll right click and I'll say duplicate, and then I'll come up here to the move tool and I'll just move that over there. And I might have to scale it a little bit, but it actually looks okay. All right, and I can see maybe this needs to be scaled just a little bit more, the side of the barrel. Let me just scale that up just a little bit. So I'll click on that layer and Shift S to scale. Shift S to scale, and where's my little, I can't find my little scale widget. Let me select none here. Maybe I have to clear the selection for that to work. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I just had to clear the selection. I had to say select none. Okay, and then I'm just going to pull that down just a tiny bit. There we go. Okay, and I just want to make sure that the textures extend, past the. It's better to have your textures go over than go under. Otherwise, you'll have parts of your mesh that don't have a texture on them. And I'll click scale. All right, perfect. Now I've got the unwrap for my barrel. I'm going to export this now, or I'm going to save this out. So I'm going to come down here to the left. I'm going to go to File, Export As, and let me call this like barrel texture. Yeah, sure, barrel texture. .png. Click Export, and click Export. There we go. Okay, so we have now created a material. This is basically our barrel material. So let's go back to GIMP. I'm going to go back to GIMP here. I mean, back to Blender. We're going to go back to Blender. And let's go to our material tab for our barrel. Our barrel. Okay. And why don't we have a material for our barrel? That's so sad. Okay, let's click the plus sign. So we're in the material tab. I'm going to click plus, and then I'm going to click new. So I'm going to create a slot and then put a material in that slot, and then I'll call this barrel material. Barrel material. And let's click assign. I don't know if that did anything, but doesn't look like it did. Okay, so now let's go to our base color here. And instead of a base color, we want an image texture. So let's grab our image texture, and then we're going to click open. We're going to go pick that texture we just made, and we're going to call that, let's go find that. That was, for me, that was in my teaching Blender, barrel, what did we call it? Barrel texture? I think that was it, barrel texture. I got a lot, it was a PNG file. It was an open image. There we go. So let's click on our viewport shading tab and look at that. See, the top of our barrel is mapped, the bottom of our barrel is mapped, and we've got our texture applied on the side. So I guess maybe the top of this I don't know what they call those, the bands around the barrel, maybe they seem like they could have been, they're pretty close to the top and bottom. But that's a texture problem. We can fix that in GIMP now, rather than having to worry about that in Blender. But that's how we did it there. So what we did here was we created we used the UV map or the UV layout for our barrel, and then we went up to the export or the UV menu here, and we exported it out and then directly in our paint editor, we put our textures over the areas that the image indicated would be mapped onto specific parts of the barrel. So what we did was we just overlaid our textures directly on the UV map and then used our UV map as a texture. So now we have a barrel that has a texture on it. And if you don't like this texture, you could put a different texture on it. But there we go. There is our barrel. And the final step here would be getting this into Unity, which should be very simple. We just have to set our axes, bring this into Unity, and to make it solid, we want to put a collider on it, probably maybe a capsule collider or a cylinder collider or something, and then turn it into something called a prefab, which is a kind of a canned resource that we can just use whenever we want. So that's video 2 of our Blender barrel, and in the next video we will get this thing into Unity.